Hello AGDxers, here's another video, and today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Not going to be talking about a specific trick or an add-on. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and that is to kind of do a full overview of all of the different things that have been added to AGD to make it into AGDx. So for those of you that don't know, this is a project that was started probably a little bit more than a year ago with myself and David Sapphire, and at the time I was working on a game, I think it was Terrapins, and I wanted to do a few extra things, and I got chatting with David about how we could do them. We started kind of poking around in the memory. Eventually Jonathan was good enough to send us the source code, and we were then able to make some of the changes that we wanted to. And I started using that as a platform for learning about Z80 programming. Eventually learned a little bit about that, was able to kind of work independently. David kind of went off to busy himself with other things such as the Next and so on, although he still chips in now and again. And this became my little pet project for me to learn about Z80, maybe write a few games and just create the kind of tools that I would want to use as a coder myself. And obviously it's nice to be able to pass it on. And so yeah, I thought I'd go through it, partly just for people that maybe are new and want to know about all the things that have been added, and also for myself to kind of review. What I've actually done is, in doing this review, I've actually found a few extra things that I would like to have added, and therefore have added them since. But anyway, we'll see how we go today. Try not to ramble too much. I'm gonna go through everything alphabetically. So I think the first thing that we'll do is we'll basically look at the character set. So yeah, so here you can see that I'm working with Andy Johns' Nixie game here. It's not the full game, but it's my kind of go-to demo really, because it's quite useful. Has a lot of aspects to it that help me to demonstrate things. So yeah, so the first thing you can see here, of course, this is new, I just added this, as I mentioned, things that I quite like. I put a bright thing around here. Just kind of helps you, because sometimes you're not quite sure where the end of the font and the start of the font is there. And the font editor in original AGD was pretty limited, so I managed to add a few extra features here. Obviously the squares here are on a grid, which is a little bit easier. I've got a highlight here which shows you which character you're editing, because that isn't always clear. And I've also just added now, so once you can step through this way, and I may have mentioned on Facebook that you can also now step up and down like that. Now the other things that I've added to the font editor is the option to clear a font, which wasn't there, and also the option to copy and paste. And you can actually copy font data into block data and even into sprite data and back, so you can move graphics from one part to the other using this method. So that's what we added there. And in addition, some of you might not know what these numbers are here. So the first number here is basically the address of the character that you are currently editing, and the reason that we put that in there is to allow you to load graphical data in that you maybe want to import from ZX Paintbrush. You may also want to load a font, and obviously the font, as you can see, it starts at 31232. There are 768 bytes here, and it also allows you to load in custom code, because this is something that's in fixed memory. That's very useful in AGD if you want to add assembly routines. Which brings me nicely to what these two numbers mean here, and these two numbers are basically the two 8-bit numbers which make up this address here, and those are the two numbers that you would use alongside 205, which means call in assembly, to give an address which would allow you to import custom code here into the font. And there are several routines I've written which apply to that here. In fact, you can see there is in fact a small amount of custom code down here. You can see this looks like kind of garbage characters, but what that is actually assembly code stored in the character set. Just small routines that do things like color effects or other additions like that. And so if you do have a knowledge of assembly language, this is one way that you can add small routines that is quite easy to do, and then you just call it inline from the script. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the font. Not a huge amount, but quite a few nice additions. And one I've just remembered as well, you can also press F, and that will show you the original Spectrum ROM font. And that's handy because if, for example, you've got, say, some custom designs here that you're using in messages, then if you press F, you can see which letter it is there, and you can kind of make a note of that in your messages. It just makes it that little bit easier to see what you're doing. Okay, so yeah, that's the fonts. Now moving on to blocks. This is quite a lot more has gone into this, of course. Now, aside from the block itself, so let's just move to another block here. So we've got, as usual, the normal eye, ink and paper, but we've now got most of the functionality that we have with sprites available here with blocks. So we can press, I'm just trying to remember all the keys now, but we can press T, that will rotate the block. We can press Control T, that will rotate the block anti-clockwise. We can press Y, that will shift the block there to the right. We can press Control Y, and that will shift it in the other direction. We can also press we can press U, that will move it up, and Control U, that will move it down. So you can tweak your block quite effectively using that. Of course, we have a preview here, and we also have a kind of tile preview which shows you what this block would look like if you used it as a kind of wallpaper, if you like, over here. And that will automatically preview, and so if you want to kind of design something on here, you can see it taking shape. And if I kind of link it like that, then you can start to make something which perhaps you want to create a kind of, you know, whatever pattern you might want to do. So yeah, so that's what you can do there. There are also two types of invert. We've got a pixel invert, which is you press O, but you can also invert swap, if you like, the paper and the ink like that, and that can help you with design as well if you want. It depends on what you want to happen when the sprite goes over the sort of background, if you like. So yeah, invert the pixels is O, and invert the actual ink and paper is Control O, just like that. And in the most recent version, we've got this now, which is we had a block palette that you could view, and I've decided to put it on the screen here. There was a help screen here. You can still see that if you press Control H. So that just comes up, and you can just get an idea if you just want to remember a few of the commands. If you don't remember them, just press a key and that will go away. And you can save this in as a screenshot, and then you can grab this in ZX Paintbrush or something if you want to change those and edit them. And to browse that, you just use keys 1 and 2 here to go across, and you use keys Q and A like that. So you can now see the block that you're editing, browse it quite easily. Obviously, another change that I've added is block types. Obviously here you've got the different types here with the number, but once you go past type 7, you can also use special types here. These are mainly used within assembly calls so that you can detect new types of blocks. You can create custom routines for things like crumbling blocks, collectible blocks, and various other different patches that I've made over the years. And so that's the purpose of that. And the rest of the information here, as you can see, also added. We've got the address of a block, and we've also got the attribute address. That's the color address of the block, and this number here is the attribute value. And again, the main reason for that is to give you information in terms of if you're going to be adding assembly language. So AGDx kind of stands for AGD Expert. That's how we came up with the name. And it is designed for people who know AGD, who want to push it a little bit, who want to incorporate assembly language and use it as a model, but then, you know, add their own personal code, custom code in there. So it's quite useful, therefore, to know these addresses. And of course, in addition, you can use these addresses to load data in from something like ZX Paintbrush or whatever, if you've designed a set of blocks. So that would be the reason that those are there. Now, the other thing I've done just recently as well is I've changed the keys a little bit so that when you press B now, you will just switch on brightness on and off, and that's it. And if you press F, that will switch the flash on and switch the flash off. And to cycle, if you're using the ULA Plus, to cycle through the color lookup tables, you now use Control C, and that will cycle through as AGD previously did. Obviously, I'm using Fuse here. You can't see ULA Plus, but that would allow you to move between the palettes. And there's also a small bug which I fixed with the ULA Plus, which displays this palette more accurately. So yeah, that is pretty much it, I think, for blocks. The only other thing that I would mention is that there is also the option to paste a sprite from the sprite menu here. So say, for example, this sprite here, what I would do is, rather than use M for a standard copy, I would use Control M, which basically does a block copy. And what I would then do is go back to the block editor, and if I want to just maybe put that little sprite in here, I would press Control K, which is basically paste 4 rather than the single block, like that. Now you can see it's pasted the first one, it hasn't updated it here, but if I just move across, you can see that it has actually done it, and there are the 4 pieces of that particular sprite. So that piece plus that's the sort of left hand side, and that's the right hand side. So you can use that then to design larger blocks. You can use the sprite editor to design a block, copy it, paste it into here. Perhaps if you're using the Meta Blocks patch, or you just want to design something like a tree or something a little bit bigger, maybe some kind of effect. So that's an option that a lot of people don't know about, and yeah, it's just a method for transferring information from sprites over to blocks. And obviously, as I mentioned before, you can also go from here and copy anything you want from over here to we'll just pick a random block, but yeah, we can basically just go into here if we wanted to paste something in to here, then we can just use that, and as you can see, it will paste from a block into a font. And that might be useful. For example, one example of using this for me was that I actually wanted a font which was rotated on its side, and so I basically moved fonts into the block, then rotated them, and then moved them back, because the rotation code isn't in the font editor, it's only in the block editor. So yeah, you might want to design things in here, it's a bit more flexible, and then move them over. So that's yeah, that's basically that. So I think that more or less sums it up for blocks, except to say that you can also press Control 2, 3 kind of hotkeys. So if you want to go to the screen editor, you can do that, and you can also press Control 3 to go to the other editor as well. Sprite editor doesn't have that option, unfortunately, because just wasn't enough memory. Might be able to squeeze it in if I get chance. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, for blocks. Those are almost all of the things that have been added. Okay, so let's take a look at screens now then. So again, quite a lot of things were added to screens. one of the most recent things that was added, of course, is mouse control, and to do that you have to have the mouse enabled. In the options, in this case in Fuse, you go to Peripherals and you select it. There's an option in Spectaculator as well. You press Control M, and Control M will switch the mouse on, and as you can see then I'm able to basically just kind of move around like this, and I can, you know, just color in like that, and it's pretty straightforward to add. And of course if you let go of the mouse, everything just behaves as it normally would. In addition to that, I've also added the coordinates here that tell you where you are on the screen, which is very useful for the coder, and as well as just showing the block here, I also write the actual block number. Again, just quite a few of these changes just giving you more information while you're working, which really helps with productivity. I was often frustrated going back, checking where something was, making a change, and so on. So this is a lot easier now to do that. Quite a few other changes though, of course, have been made to the screen editor. Some of them more complicated than others. One of the simple things that we added is the option to clear the screen, which didn't exist in the previous AGD. So that is one of the useful options. The other thing I've done is standardize the keys. So rather than using N and P, we use minus and plus. It's really designed for use on an emulator. I don't imagine there are many people using an actual Spectrum nowadays to write on this. Another thing that I've added is if you press Q, this is a query, and it actually does two things. First of all, it will tell you up here about the location in memory that this is currently stored when it's compressed, and this is the size of the screen when it's compressed, so that's helping you with memory management. And at the same time, as you can see here, it also will display during the pause, it will display the objects and the sprites which are active. Obviously you can't actually move them in here, which is unfortunate, but when you're designing the screen and you want to remember where you've put your sprites, rather than go back and have to look, it's actually pretty straightforward. You can basically just get a little preview of where they are. So that's nice and easy to implement. Another addition, I guess we could say, is that the fast draw routine has been modified, and it's basically a lot faster than it was. So the fast draw in the original AGD really wasn't very fast. So if we now press F, we can draw, and as you can see, it will draw very, very quickly. Incidentally, in mouse mode, if I just switch back to mouse, you can also press the right button on the mouse like this, and you can just kind of wipe away anything that you changed. I mean, the mouse is a little bit fiddly, to be honest. It's not ideal. It's not really designed for this, is it? But it's quite a useful feature for kind of coloring in and wiping things out and just speeding up the process. I think you'll find yourself kind of jumping back and forth between the mouse and keyboard and getting used to doing that. So that's another addition. Let's think what else we've got here. Well, another thing that we can do is just let me turn the fast draw off. Okay, just clear that away. We can, if we want to, for example here, we can press E, and E will take us immediately to edit this particular block, and I can make a change just like that. And if I press E again, it will switch. So this is an actual option within the block code. It just lets you toggle, right? So you can go there and you can edit, and then you can go back. So that makes it quite easy to go to and from a particular thing. So you can go here, you know, change the color, go back, there you go back in, cycle back through like that. Okay, and we're back here. The other thing I've done, actually, as you might have noticed, is that this now cursor now remains exactly where you left it when you're editing, which makes a big difference, really. It was quite annoying if you went back to the block editor, then you jump back and you were back up here in this corner and you had to go back down. So again, saving time, helping you be more productive. Hopefully that's quite useful. And of course, it does make it a little bit easier now to jump between blocks and screens, and that effectively allows us to, you know, if I want to say go to the editor here, I can now, you know, scroll around and choose whatever it is I'm looking for. I can see all the blocks I want like this, and if I go back in now, of course that block will be selected and I can just kind of draw like that. In addition, if you want to pick a certain block to edit with, and again you can use the mouse or not, it's up to you, but let's say if I just switch over to the mouse now, so you can press B and that will select any block that you are currently hovering over. So if I wanted this one here, I just press B, and as you can see it's been selected up there, so I can just point like this and I can just pick anything from here, so it makes it a lot easier to just say, oh, I want to say add another flower, so then I would just go like this, put that one there, press this one here and just put that one like that. So that's very quick with the mouse. You can use the keyboard as well, of course, like that. Now the other thing that the query command does, this one here, when you press Q, it will actually save the screen. So while you've been working on it, it hasn't actually been saved, and that's quite handy, because if you kind of make a big kind of mess, like let's say for example I would just go a little bit crazy with the mouse like this and just kind of delete a whole load of stuff like that, then basically I can press Ctrl Z and it will bring it back to the last save point. So you can press Q to save it, or if you go to another screen it will save it as well, right? So when you're working, you can always just do like an emergency reload before you've done a query or moved to another screen, and you can go back. And in addition to that, there is also the option U, which will just undo the very last action you did. So if I put that down there like that, and then I press U, as you can see it will go back and it will remove it like that. Press U and there you go. So you see it restores it. So there's another very nice simple little additional feature there. And now let's move on to a few more advanced features. You can press A. That will allow you to view with attributes, and it will basically, oops, sorry. So basically it will toggle the attribute on and off if you want to see that. And now one of the quite powerful features that I've added is a kind of tile copy and paste. Now what that will do is it will copy 16 blocks rather than just one. It will copy 16. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say this 1, 2, 3 like that. So if I go here and I press Control C, this is Control C, standard Windows shortcut, Control C, and then if I go to here, say I can press Control V like that, and that will basically paste those blocks as a group like that, where I want them to go. Press Control Z, it will of course restore to the previous image. So yeah, we can just do, as I said, just do like that. Now, but there is another option as well, which is quite interesting, because let's say for example I wanted to copy a shape. So let's say for example I wanted to just add a little bit of a border like that, put that there like that. Okay, now if I copy this and instead of pressing Control V, I'll press Control B, which is the next key along, and what that will do now is it will paste this block, but it won't paste block 0. So this part won't paste. In other words, I've now got a brush, which is the shape of that little shape there, just to demonstrate that. So if I press Control B here, you'll see that I can use that to basically draw and design something into a particular shape. So if I want it to overlap like that, I can kind of just do that and make it overlap, just fiddle about with it in that way, and that can allow you to just press Ctrl Z again. But if I wanted to, for example, you know, you can make a kind of shape like, oops, like something like this, and then press Ctrl C, and if I, just to show you how it's pasting there, I'll put that there, and I'll press here, I'll press Ctrl V. You see that pastes the whole thing, and then if I press it with Ctrl B, it's only going to paste those blocks there. So that's another feature that a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of, and it is quite powerful. So yeah, let's press Ctrl Z again, reset back to where we were. Another thing that we can do is we can use replace. So if I was to say, let's say grab this mushroom here and then go to the star and highlight the star. Now if I use the replace command, then basically, which is Control R, then that will replace all the stars with those mushrooms. But again, press Control Z, you'll be fine. You can go back, so that's not a problem. And again, just to demonstrate that, we can grab this flower here, and in fact, no, let's do something a little different. Let's grab this block here. Oops, wrong key, sorry. Right, so let's pick this one here, and we'll replace, let's replace, say, this block here, Control R, there you can see that has replaced that. And then if I wanted to, I could try and replace these, and again Control R like that. So yeah, I think you get the general idea. That's how you can replace things using keys on the screen editor. Okay, so that's pretty much it for screens. The last thing I'll talk to you about today is this new addition here, which is called data. Now, the main function of data is one of the big issues with AGD is that whenever the engine is updated, previous games are no longer compatible. So if you add new features, then you basically make other games incompatible. So if you've got projects that you've been working on, I don't know about you, but I've got, you know, a couple of dozen projects which are, you know, half baked, half finished, and I will get around to them eventually. Sometimes I get in a particular mood for a particular project and I want to load it in, but I want to use the latest version of AGDx, and I've worked pretty hard to maintain compatibility for all of the time that I've been using this, so that you can always load in original AGD games right from the very first one. So it's been backwards compatible all the way, but there is a limit to that, and I did want to start adding new options, particularly in relation to things like multi-tape, multi-load, 1 to 8K support, new sound effects, and so on. So, you know, various other things that I know people have been asking about, and it would always break compatibility, and I never wanted to do that. But what I've done now is I've created this data option here, and what this data option does is basically saves the game data, but it doesn't save the game engine. And the reason that's so useful is that we can then basically use that to create a tap file or a binary file, which we can then import back into AGD, and it will then reconfigure it to work with whichever engine is that you've got loaded. So basically it means that I can upgrade the engine, we can add new things like, for example, sound effects, and you can basically load your game in to the previous version of AGDx, then save it as a tap, then go to the new version, and after that you can then load it in as a tap, and that will then work, and it will load in. So that's the way that basically works. And to do it, all you need to do is create an empty tape, and then press S to do a full tap save, and then you go to the new version, press L. I'll probably do a video on this anyway, but it does work at the moment. I don't necessarily recommend that you use it right now because, well, obviously there isn't a version out there yet, and I haven't fully finalized the format for the tap, but it does work, and you can use it to load games or back them up or whatever you want using that method if you want to just save the data. Okay, and then this option here, multi-part, this will be done eventually, not yet, but that will basically allow you to save data as a game, as a supplementary part of a game, like the second part of a game, which will then be loaded in from the script so that you can write one part, create a tap for that, and then add another part on the same tap so that the final tap includes the additional data. And we'll probably try to see if possible to create that so that it has a password on it, or it's headerless, so that you can't so that the user can't just load that game in. They need to have to complete part 1 in order to continue into part 2 if that's what you want to do. Obviously if you want to just add a second standalone game, that's also an option. Okay, so that's basically the data options there, and I may add more additions to that in terms of allowing you to import and export things like sprites and various other bits and pieces. We shall see. But I think that's enough for today. I think that's about 30 minutes. That's a good long 30 minutes of your time that you'll never get back. So yeah, I hope you found it useful. I'm going to continue this later with an overview next. We'll perhaps look at some of the other options here, events and miscellaneous, jump table, keys, sprites, obviously, objects, positions, various other things which have also been updated. Most of them have only had fairly small minor additions. I think sprites probably is the big one that's also been significantly updated. So yeah, hope you found that interesting and useful. Perhaps you've found a few things that you didn't know about. And as always, keep enjoying AGD and happy coding. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.